Hello everyone and welcome to this course on Microsoft Word 2021. My name is Deborah Ashby and I'm a Microsoft IT trainer with over 25 years of experience not only using but also training all the different versions of Word. And I am super excited to be your host for this course. Now, Word 2021 is the latest standalone release from Microsoft. And it's really designed for people who still want to use Word and have all of the latest functionality, but don't necessarily want to commit to a Microsoft 365 subscription. Now, it might be that you're coming to this course after having used a slightly older version of Word, or maybe a much older version of Word. If that is the case, then I would definitely recommend jumping onto the Microsoft website and having a quick look at the What's New in Word 2021 page. You're going to find so much information here, which is going to take you through some of the main differences, the main changes since the last version of Word. And fear not, we will be going through a lot of these as we work through this course. Now, if you're still a little bit unsure as to what the difference is between Word 2021 standalone and Word for Microsoft 365, then I would highly recommend you check out this webpage just here. This basically goes through a comparison of Office 2021 versus Microsoft 365 and can really point you towards the main differences and the pros and cons of each. So if we take a look down this webpage, you can see some of the differences between Microsoft 365 and Office 2021. Now, if you want to use Word for Microsoft 365, you're going to need to pay for a monthly subscription. And that generally tends to be somewhere between $5 and $8. And whilst this is a low-cost fee each month, it is a monthly commitment. And what you essentially do is you rent the software from Microsoft as opposed to actually owning the software yourself. Some of the advantages for Word for Microsoft 365 are that 6 people can share one account, and you can access your applications on the go via the mobile app, so on and so forth. It also means that any upgrades that are made to Word by Microsoft are automatically deployed to your PC. So you don't have to keep buying the latest version of Word. Now, whilst that suits a lot of people, it doesn't suit everybody. And you'll find that at a lot of larger companies, it's not so easy for them to just switch everybody across to a Microsoft 365 subscription. So if you're somebody who prefers to buy a license for Word 2021, own that copy and just make one payment and not sign up for a monthly commitment, then the standalone version of Word is going to be the best choice for you. You're still going to get things like all of the security updates, but you're only making one payment. And remember that one payment is going to be higher than the monthly charge for Word for Microsoft 365, but you only make that payment once. And it's definitely worth shopping around different websites because you can get some really good deals if you do want to buy the standalone version of Word. So this training course is designed for users of Word 2021. Now, there is a lot of crossover between Word 2021 and Word for Microsoft 365. So if you have maybe been using the Word 365 version and you're coming across to Word 2021, then it's going to be a pretty seamless transition. This is the latest version with all of the new stuff in it. Throughout this course, I'll be throwing in little tips and tricks that I like to use, as well as referencing keyboard shortcuts wherever possible. Throughout this course, I'll be using different course files to work through the examples. So if you want to follow along with me, then you're going to find all of the course files that I use available to download from the course files folder. And for each lesson, there is a starting course file and a completed course file. So when you start the video, open up the starting file, and if for some reason you get lost, or you just want to skip to the next lesson, there's also a completed version of the course file as well. So you should be able to pick up this course at any given point using the course files. So make sure that you have those downloaded from the website before we begin. You'll also find at the end of each section an exercise file. And this is going to help you practice some of the skills that you've learnt. And you'll find all of the exercise files in the exercise files folder. So once again, make sure you have those downloaded if you'd like to work along with me. So with all that said, it's time to dive into Word 2021. Once again, my name is Deb, and I hope you enjoyed this course.
Welcome to the course. Please watch this video as we have some important information that you'll need to get the most out of this class. This course is video-based but does include downloadable exercise and instructor files. The exercise files relate to specific exercise videos. Don't worry though, your instructor will tell you which files to open for each exercise. The instructor files are the files we used when creating the video sessions. You can follow along if you wish, but that's entirely optional. You can download the files from the next module, and here's how. Once you've downloaded the files, you'll need to unzip them. If you've not unzipped files before, here's how. All of our videos are high definition. Depending on your internet speed, Udemy may default to a lower playback level. We recommend viewing in high definition. Here's how you can change that. If you want to speed up or slow down your video playback, you can do that too. And here's how. Udemy may ask you to review this course after you've only completed a few modules. We know that can be annoying, as it's like being asked to review a 2-hour movie after 5 minutes. It's up to you when you want to leave a review. We hope you enjoy the course.
In this section of the course, we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about mail merge. And if you've never heard of mail merge before, it's a really quick way of creating multiple letters, multiple envelopes, multiple labels, and addressing them to different recipients. For example, if you have a letter that you've typed up, like the one that I've typed up on the screen right now, and you need to send this same letter to 20, 50, 100 people, instead of manually creating 50 letters, you can get mail merge to do it for you and add different recipient addresses onto the top of each letter. Now, in order to do this, you need to have some kind of recipients list. And the way that you address these to different recipients is you need to either already have a list of the recipients that you want to send these letters to, or you can import the details from your Outlook contacts, or you can type up the list manually yourself. Now, we're going to send this letter to 20 different people, and I have the 20 recipients stored off in an Excel workbook. So let's take a look at that first of all. So this is my recipients list. It's just a very basic table. I've got some headings at the top, and then I have my recipient details. So we have their title, first and last names, and then their address details. And this is just saved into a regular Excel workbook, which we're going to import into our mail merge. So let's jump back to Word and take a look at the ribbon that we're going to be working on in this section. Now, you'll find all of your mail merge options on the mailings ribbon at the top here. Notice we have a start mail merge group, and if we click the drop down, we can basically choose what it is that we want to merge. Now, we're not going to use any of these. We're going to go directly to the step-by-step mail merge wizard. And I would say that if you are fairly new to creating mail merges, use the wizard first of all, because it's really going to help you and guide you through this process. So let's click, and notice that it opens the mail merge pane on the right hand side. Now I'm going to drag this out so it's a bit wider and easier to see. So the first thing we need to do here is select the document type that we're creating. Well, we're creating letters, so we can simply click on Next at the bottom. We now need to choose our starting document. So do we want to use the current document that we have open? Do we want to start from a template, or do we want to start from an existing document? Well, I want to put my recipient addresses on the top of the current document. So let's select that option and then click on Next at the bottom. Now it's at this stage that we get to choose where our recipient list is stored. So I can choose to use an existing list, which is the option we're going to use. I can import my contact details from my Outlook contacts, or I can type a new list. Now, if I choose type a new list and then create, it's going to allow me to essentially create a recipients list on the fly when I'm in the middle of the mail merge. So that might be something you want to do, or you might want to have them saved off somewhere else. So let's cancel out of this. We're going to use an existing list. Let's browse for the file. Now the file we're going to be using is this one here, address_list, and you'll find this file in the course files folder if you'd like to use it too. Let's click on open. It's recognized that all of my data is on the first sheet of the Excel workbook, and it's also recognized that I do have column headings in my data. So if you do, make sure that you have this little checkbox selected. Let's click on OK. So now it's going to open up this little Edit Recipients window. And this is just going to show me all of the recipients from my Excel spreadsheet. So it's effectively imported that data into Word. Notice we have the different columns. If you want to rearrange these columns, then you can. So for example, title, I actually want this to be before first name and last name, so I can simply drag and drop it. I'm going to put first name before last name, and I think also town and city is going to go before the state. Also notice that we have checkboxes in here, so if you don't want to include everybody in this list in your mail merge, you can go through and deselect different people. Then right at the bottom here, there's a few different actions that we can take on this list. So maybe I want to sort this list in alphabetical order. So if I click on sort, I could say that I want to sort the list by the, let's say, first name in ascending order. And that's going to change the order of my list. I can even apply a filter to my list. So maybe I just want to send this letter to everybody with the title Miss. Something like that. And if I click on OK, those are going to be the only recipients included in my mail merge. Now I don't want to do that, so let's click back on filter and say clear all and OK to put that list back. We can check our list for any accidental duplicate entries, so I always recommend that you do that to make sure that you're not getting duplicate letters produced. And if we need to maybe check a specific recipient, we can search for any recipient we like in here. So maybe if I type in Dennis and click on Find Next, it's going to highlight that record in my data. So a few different things that you can do in here. Once you're happy with your list, click on OK. And now we can click on Next at the bottom to move to the next step. So this is where you have the opportunity to write out your letter if you haven't done it already. Now we have, so we don't need to worry too much about that. But the thing that we do need to add at this stage is we need to add the recipient address at the top of the letter. Now notice in the mail merge pane, we have an option to insert an address block. So if we click on this, this is where we get to choose how our address is formatted. So how do we want the name to display? I could choose to have just the first name, and you can see in the preview on the right hand side exactly what that's going to look like. Or maybe I want it to say their first and last name, or maybe I want to include their title. And we can scroll through and see what that looks like for each of our recipients. We can also choose if we want to include or not the postal address. So I'm going to say yes, we want to include that. Let's click on OK. And what we get in our document is basically what we call an address block field. And this is kind of like a placeholder, which shows us where that recipient's address is going to appear on each letter. Now, the other thing I might want to have on this letter is I might want it to be personalized. I might want it to say, Dear Dennis, Dear Mark, Dear Sarah. And this is what we call a greeting line. So once again, in the mail merge pane, let's choose greeting line. I can choose if I want it to say dear or to or none. the format that I want to use. So for this, I want it to say dear and then the first name, and then I want a comma after that. And for any invalid recipient names, it's just going to say dear sir or madam. And again, just underneath, we can scroll through our recipients and get an idea as to what that is going to look like. So let's click on OK. So now that we have those two, what we call merge fields in there, I'm going to go to the next step and preview the letters. So this is where it shows me exactly what my letter is going to look like when we complete the mail merge. And I can scroll through my recipients to take a look at all of my different letters. Now you can see in there I've got a little comma where there shouldn't really be one. That's probably coming from my data source. What I would need to do here is go back, remove that comma, and then select the data source again. So it's not too much of a problem. If I want to edit the recipient list at any point, I can choose Edit Recipient List, go in and make my changes. So I'm pretty happy with how these are looking. Let's complete the merge, and then we can choose if we want to send these letters straight to the printer or if we want to review them before we do that. So I'm going to say Edit Individual Letters, and I want to merge all of the records. So let's click on OK. So what happens next is Word basically creates a brand new document. You can see it's titled Letters 1. And in this document, we're going to find all of our letters. So I should have 20 pages with 20 letters contained on them, all with different recipient addresses. So you can probably see this is a much more time-efficient way of creating multiple letters to send out to people. And that is pretty much how a mail merge works, using the step-by-step mail merge wizard. In the last lesson, we created 20 letters to send out to 20 different recipients. And for those 20 letters, we're going to need 20 envelopes with the same addresses on them. So once again, we can use the mail merge wizard to create those envelopes for us. So let's jump up to the Mailings tab. And let's go to Start Mail Merge. Now notice in here I have an envelopes option, or I can choose to go through the step-by-step mail merge wizard. Now I'm going to use the wizard again, and this time we are creating envelopes. So let's click on Next to start our document, and then we can choose how do we want to set up our envelopes. So we can use the current document, we can change the document layout, or we can start from an existing document. Now I'm going to say I want to change the document layout, and I'm going to go to my envelope options. And this is where you can come in and select the size of your envelope. So this really depends on the type of envelope that you want to print these addresses on. So I'm going to just choose the default. I can also do things like change the font of the delivery address. So if I click on font, let's take a look at what we have. So I think I'm going to go for, let's go for Arial. And I'm just going to have regular font. We're going to make it 12. We could change the color if we wanted to. That's quite exciting. Let's do that. Let's make it a dark blue color, nothing too unprofessional. And click on OK and OK again. Now notice as soon as I do that, I get a completely different layout on my page. So this now looks more like an envelope. Now, this is quite hard to see because I don't have my show hide markers turned on, but if we turn those on, can you see that I have basically a little text box in the middle here? Because in general, your addresses are going to go in the middle of your envelope or in the middle towards the bottom. And you can move this up and down depending on where you want that address to appear. So let's just put this somewhere in the middle, and I think I'm just going to drag it to about there. So let's move on to the next step. So again, this is where we can select our recipient list. Once again, we're going to use an existing list. Let's browse. I'm going to pick up our address list one more time. Let's click on Open and OK. And once again, this window is going to pop open if we want to make any changes. Now, I want to include everybody, so let's click on OK. And move on to the next step, arrange our envelope. So this is where we can choose what we want to add. Now for this, I don't need a greeting line or anything like that. I'm just going to add an address block. I'm going to have the full name, including their title. So let's click on OK. And you can see where that appears. And once again, I can make any minor adjustments I need to by moving this little placeholder around. The next thing to do is preview the envelope. And we can see exactly what that is going to look like. Now I think I want to move this down just a little bit. So let's put this a bit further down here. Like so. So I'm pretty happy with how this is looking. Again, I'm just going to turn off my show hide markers to make that a bit cleaner, and let's complete the merge. I'm going to say I want to edit the individual documents so I can review them before I print them. And if I scroll out a little bit so I can get an overview, this is what these envelopes are going to look like. The final thing to do here would be to load up your envelopes into your printer and then simply click on File and Print to send these off. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at how you can use mail merge options to create a full page of labels. So labels might be something that you want to print out and use on letters, or maybe you want to label something else. Maybe it's a set of cabinets, or maybe boxes, or something entirely different. Now, once again, you need to make sure that you make a note of the brand of labels that you're using, the type of labels, because this is going to be really important when it comes to setting up your page to correspond with the labels that you're going to print onto. So make sure you check the packet of your labels first, make a note of the brand and the size. Now we're going to do this in a slightly different way to the last two examples because we're not going to use the Mail Merge wizard to do this. So let's go up to the Mailings tab, and instead of going into Start Mail Merge and choosing this option, we're going to go to the Create button and choose Labels. Now this is going to open up the Envelopes and Labels pane. Now we're not going to add our recipients into this address area. We're going to do that a different way in a moment. Instead, all we're going to do in here is we're going to specify the brand of label that we're using and make sure that we set it up so that we're printing multiple labels on the same page. We don't really just want to print one per page. Now notice here that my label that I've selected is Avery A4 A5. And if you want to change that, if you click on Options, you can go in here, you can choose your label vendor, and then you can go through the different product numbers to get the exact label. Again, just refer to the information on the packet of labels that you're using. So I'm going to choose Avery A4 A5. Let's click on OK. And I'm going to say that I want a full page of the same label. So it's basically going to fit as many labels onto the page as it can according to the dimensions of each label. So once we're happy with this, let's say New Document, and there are my different labels. So let's zoom in a little bit and take a look at this first label. Now once again, I'm just going to put some of the addresses that we have in that Excel worksheet onto these labels. Maybe instead of printing an envelope, I just have a non-window envelope and I need to put a label on it. Or maybe I'm putting labels on packages. Now we can add what we call our own merge fields into our labels. Now you're going to find your merge fields in this Write and Insert Fields group just here. But notice at the moment every single option is grayed out. And that's because I need to attach my recipients list to this document first. So let's go to the Start Mail Merge group, choose Select Recipients, and we're going to use an existing list again. I'm going to use the same address list, so let's click it and click on Open. I'm going to keep all of this the same, click on OK, and as soon as I attach that recipients list in the background of this document, you can see that now I have a few more options available in this Write and Insert Fields group. So now I can go through and I can be very specific about what pieces of information I want to add to my labels. Now notice here I do have the address block to add the entire address and the name, but I could, if I wanted to, just pick and choose the fields that I want to use. So if I click the Insert Merge Field drop down, it's basically going to show me the column headings from my data source. So maybe on the label, I just want to have the first name and the last name and the state. I don't need any of the other information. So what I can do here is I can say first name. I want a space in between, so let's make sure we add that. And then we want last name. Let's press Enter. Let's insert another field. I just want to have the state, and let's also put the zip code. So let's press enter again and zip code. Now, once I have all of this information in here, I can format it a little bit. So I'm going to select it, and I'm actually going to put this in the middle. Now, if I want to move this block of text down, this is effectively a table. Notice that we have this cross at the top, and if I select it, notice we have the table design and the table layout ribbons. So this is where I can choose how I want to align this text. So in the alignment group, I'm going to say I want it dead in the center, like so. So now I have my merge fields in there. Let's go back to mailings and I can preview the result. So let's see how this merge data is going to look. I can even scroll through my different recipients just to see what that looks like for each one. Now that looks pretty good to me. Let's deselect preview results to take us back to our codes. So now that we have our information correct in the label and it's positioned correctly, how do we get this code into each one of our labels? Well, I guess I could copy and paste it into each label, but if I have 50 or 100 labels, that's going to be quite time consuming. Fortunately, we have an Update Labels button. So if we click Update Labels, it's basically going to put that code inside each of the labels. Also notice it's added a next record field so that Word knows it needs to move on to the next label. If we preview our results again, we should find that our labels are looking exactly as we'd like them to look. Once we've completed this process, we can then go to Finish and Merge. And once again, I'm going to edit the individual documents. I'm going to merge all records. Let's click on OK. And now I have my pages full of labels based off of my recipients list. I can now print these out and fix them to whatever parcel, letter, package I need to. So that is how you can use merge fields to include just the information that's of interest to you. In this exercise, we're going to practice some of the skills that we've learned in this section of the course. So the first thing I'd like you to do is to open the letter sampleletter.docx from the exercise files folder. I'd then like you to use the mail merge wizard to create 5 letters. I'd like you to attach the recipient list patientlist.xlsx, and I'd like you to sort the recipient list into alphabetical order by last name. I'd also like you to edit the recipient list to only include the first 5 recipients in the merge. I'd then like you to add an address block to the letter that's going to show the full name and address of the recipient. And finally, I'd like you to add a greeting line that includes their title and last name. I'd like you to complete the merge and then save the merge document as completed letters, your initials. So a few different things to do there. If you'd like to see my answer, then please keep watching. So I've opened up the sampleletter.docx file. And the first thing I asked you to do was to use the mail merge wizard to create 5 letters. So we're going to jump up to the mailings tab and we're going to go to Start Mail Merge and open up the mail merge wizard. Now we're creating letters, so let's just click on Next at the bottom. I want to use the current document that we have open, and now I can choose my recipients list. So I want to use an existing list. I'm going to browse for it, and it's this one just here, patientlist.xlsx. Let's open the file and confirm that the first row has column headers, which it does. And now I can see my recipients. Now, looking at this, I'm going to do a little bit of rearranging. If you didn't do this, that's absolutely fine. But I want the title, first name, last name, address 1, then I want the town and city, followed by state and zip code. I then asked you to sort this list alphabetically by the last name. So let's click on Sort. We're going to sort by the last name in ascending order and click on OK. Once you've sorted this list, I asked you to only include the first 5 recipients in the merge. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, everything else we're going to deselect and click on OK. Let's click on Next at the bottom. Then I asked you to add an address block. So we're going to click address block and we want to include the full name and postal address. So I'm going to select the defaults just here. Let's click on OK. And then I'm going to add a greeting line. So let's move down to the correct point in the letter. Let's click on greeting line and I want to use the full name again. Let's click on OK. And now we can preview our letters. That looks pretty good to me. I'm going to complete the merge, edit individual letters. We're going to merge all of the records. And now we have a brand new document called Letters 1. And I should find that I have 5 letters in this document. The final thing to do here was to save the document. So we're going to go to File, Save As. I didn't mind where you saved this. I'm going to save this into the exercise files. And I asked you to call this Completed Letters followed by your initials. And click on Save. We're going to be taking a look at finalizing our document prior to printing it, sending it to a client or a customer, or collaborating on it with others. And finalizing our document really involves just making some final checks to make sure that everything in your document is as perfect as it can be. In this first lesson, I want to talk to you about printing. And the document that we're going to print is a slightly older version of the sample book document. This is the version that contains the track changes and the comments. Because if you recall, when we were talking about comments in an earlier lesson, I mentioned that I was going to show you how you can make sure that when you print your document, you're also printing all your track changes and all of your comments. Now, when it comes to printing, there are a couple of different ways that you can get to your print screen. You can jump up to File, and you can see we have Print in there. Or alternatively, you can use the keyboard shortcut Control-P, which is going to take you into that same screen. Now notice in the main window, we have a preview of what our document is going to look like. And if you're as old as me, you'll probably remember in previous versions of Word, we used to have a dedicated print preview button. We don't have that anymore because we have the preview when we're setting up our printing options, which is a lot more useful. Also notice underneath the document, we have a little scroller just here, so we can scroll through and take a look at the different pages contained within our document. So it's always good to do a quick review to make sure that things like headers and footers and anything else you have in your document looks as you want it to look. We also have a zoom slider over on the right-hand side if we need to zoom in or zoom out of our document, and then we can set up our print options. Now over on the left-hand side, you'll notice that we have quite a few things that we can change here. Now the big button is what we press when we actually want to send this document off to print. And we can also specify how many copies of this document we want up here. Always make sure that you have your printer connected and selected in this drop-down. So it might be that you're using a Wi-Fi printer or maybe one that you plug into your PC. Whichever one you're using, make sure that Word recognizes it and make sure that you have it selected. Also make sure that you have the correct size paper in your printer. Now when it comes to adjusting our settings, this first one here is where we specify what it is that we're going to print. So I have this set to print all pages, which is effectively the entire document. But I could choose to print just the current page, so the one that I'm seeing in the print preview, or I can choose a custom range to print. So if I wanted to print pages 1, 2, and 3 only, I could type in here 1, 2, 3. If I wanted to only print a range of pages, maybe pages 5 to 10, I can type it in like that. I could even add on the end there, I want to print pages 5 to 10, but also pages 12 and 13. So you can really get very granular about exactly what it is that you're printing. Now I want to print all pages. We can then choose how we want to print. So do we want to print one-sided or do we want to print manually on both sides? So again, this is a choice that you need to make. We can then choose collated or uncollated. So this is relevant if you're printing more than one copy. So if I was printing 3 copies of this document, I can choose to have the pages print 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth until the first copy is printed. I can then print all of the second copy and then all of the third copy. But if I specify uncollated, it's going to print all of the page 1s first, then all of the page 2s, then all of the page 3s, so on and so forth. So again, select whichever one is most relevant to what you're doing. I can then choose at this stage if I want to print in portrait or landscape orientation, and I can also choose my paper size from here, so make sure that this matches whatever you have loaded into your printer. I can also customize my margins, so if at this stage I decide I want to change my margins to something else, I could switch them back to normal, or I can have narrow, moderate, so on and so forth. Now I think I'm going to stick with narrow. And then finally, I can choose how many pages I want to print per sheet of paper. So it might be that I want to save a bit of space and print out 2 pages per sheet, or maybe 4 or 6, so on and so forth. Now I'm going to stick with 1 page per sheet. Now just going back to the thing I mentioned earlier, aside from specifying to print the actual body of the document, because we have comments and track changes, I want to specify that I want to print those as well. Now you'll find this option underneath this first setting. So where we choose print all pages, we can then specify underneath here exactly what we're printing. Now this document info section allows us to print some additional pages which shows some specific information about the document. So maybe I just want a page to print out that shows me a list of all of the document properties. So things like the file name, where the file is stored, the template I'm using, the author name, the title, things like that. Maybe I want to print a page that just lists out all of the track changes. Now this is different to seeing the track changes actually within the body of the document. This is just going to print a list of the markup. And I can even print a list of the styles that I've used in my document. So these will appear on additional pages after you've printed the main body of the document. If you're not interested in that, then just leave all of these deselected. Now when it comes to printing comments and track changes, like we have in this document, you can see we have our balloons down the side. This is where you want to make sure you have print markup selected. If I deselect this, you'll notice that those balloons disappear from the document. So this is the little option that you need to choose. You can also specify in here if you're only going to print odd pages or only print even pages. And in some circumstances, that's a useful thing to have. So those are all of the settings that you can define prior to printing your document. So customize these as you like, and then when you're ready to print, you just need to click the print button at the top of the screen. In the previous lesson, when we were talking about printing, I briefly mentioned that you can print a list of your document properties. And if you're wondering what document properties are and why they can be useful, let's take a look at them now. Now you'll find your document properties underneath File and in the Info tab. And if you cast your eyes over to the right-hand side, this is a list of your document properties. Now currently I'm showing a reduced list of the properties. If I want to see them all, I need to click the link at the bottom, Show All Properties. Now document properties are essentially pieces of information about your file, very similar to metadata. We can see things in here such as the size of the file, how many pages this file has, how many words, the total editing time, the title, the template that I'm using, just the regular normal .m template, the company that this document is attributed to, as well as things like the last time this document was modified, when it was created, and also who the author of this document is. You'll also notice that some of these properties don't have anything in them. So wherever we have a blank property, this is where you can go in and you can add your own information. For example, I could choose to tag this document with specific keywords. So this document is a book, so I might want to tag it with the word book. And if I want to add more tags, I can separate them with a comma and then add the next one. I can also add comments in here as well. I can add a status, so maybe it's in review status. I could add a category if I wanted to. So again, I'm just going to call this books. It's part of that category. And I could also add in what we call a hyperlink base. So if I have a lot of hyperlinks in this document that are all linking to maybe documents on our internal work server, our internal network server, instead of having to type the entire path name of the document each time I want to link to it, I could choose to maybe put the server name in here, which means I can just link to the document name in the document. Now, don't get too caught up on that at the moment. It's just another example of a property that you can add. Now, some of these properties you can't manually change, so things such as the last modified date and when this was created. These are automatically generated by the system when you start doing things with this document. Now, properties are all well and good. They help us see certain pieces of information that are pertinent to this particular document, but how else can we use document properties? Well, we can use things like tags to search for our documents. So for example, I've tagged this document with the word book. So if I was in File Explorer and I couldn't remember the name of this document, I could search for its tag and it would find it. So let's take a look at a quick example of that in action. So I've very quickly opened up File Explorer, and you can navigate to a specific folder where you think this file is located. That might be something as broad as your C drive, or it might be a little bit more specific if you know that it's in a certain folder. Over in the search area at the top here, if we click, all I need to do is type tag, : and then I can use one of the tags. So in this case, book. Now let's make this a bit wider so it's easy to see. So now I can press enter. It's going to go away and you can see it's found that document. I also tagged this with story, so I could do the same here. I could type in tag and then story. If I hit enter, I'm going to get the same document. So adding tags to your different documents can really assist you when it comes to finding those documents again. Now, aside from these properties that we have just here, if we click the little drop down arrow, we do have some more advanced properties that we can complete for this document as well. So we have a few different tabs at the top. Underneath the General tab, we can see that basic information again, things like created, modified, and accessed. I can see some summary information, so I've got the title, the subject, the author. I can add in a manager if I wanted to, any comments, so on and so forth. Statistics, so this gives me a bit more information, so who last saved it, the times I've edited it, the total editing time, and statistics such as the number of pages, paragraphs, lines, words, so on and so forth. And this can be particularly useful if you have been told to maybe write a blog post or an article that's under 2,000 words, for example. You can see the number of words in here. If we go to contents, this is just showing me my cover page, and then we have a custom area as well. So if I want to add anything additional into the properties for this document, then I could. So maybe I want to say that this has been checked by my manager. So let's say Chris, and I'm going to say add. So that anybody who looks in this properties area can see, okay, this document has been reviewed and checked by Chris. And again, we can use any of these things to search for specific documents. So whilst adding in document properties isn't essential, it is a good habit to get into because it's good to document all of the documents that you create, and it's also going to assist you when it comes to things like searching. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at how we can check our document for issues prior to sending it out to others. Now, when I say issues, I really mean three different things. We want to check for accessibility, check for compatibility, and also check that the document that we're sending out doesn't contain any harmful information. So let's take a look at this in a little bit more detail. Now, if we jump up to the File tab and go down to Info, notice in the middle here we have a Check for Issues button. So if we click the drop down, you can see we have three different things in here. We can inspect our document, check the accessibility, or check the compatibility. So let's start with inspecting the document. Now underneath it says check the document for hidden properties or personal information. So what do we mean by that? Well, in the last lesson, I was talking to you about document properties. And we can see our document properties on the right-hand side. We have things like the last time this was modified, the author of the document, the number of pages, the file size, things like that. Now, all of these things might seem quite innocuous to you, but sometimes information that's found in the properties of a document can be particularly damaging. And again, I'm going to use an example of the legal industry. In general, when a lawyer sends a document out to a client or maybe the other side, they will make sure that they remove all of the document properties from the document first. So that means if the recipient comes into file and info, they can't see who the author was, when it was last modified, things like that. Those things can sometimes have a big impact, even though they seem fairly innocuous pieces of information. So we can inspect our document and remove things like document properties. We can also check to see if we've accidentally left any comments in a document that maybe we don't want other people to see. And we can check for numerous other items. So if we click on Inspect Document, it's going to open up the Document Inspector and we can specify what we want to check our document for. So currently I'm checking to see if I have any comments, versions or revision marks left in my document. In general, unless you're sending it out between your team, if your document is finalized and you want to send it to a client, you want to make sure that all track changes have either been accepted or rejected, all comments have been dealt with, so on and so forth. So we don't really want to send anything out with these still left in. We can also check to see if we have any document properties and personal information, metadata in the file that might be problematic. We can check for any task pane. So if we've left a task pane open in Word, if the recipient opens the document, the task pane will also open. So we can get it to inspect for task pane add-ins saved into the document. We can get it to check things like links, so maybe links to other documents which might be causing a problem. And also things like any macros we might have stored in the document. Another important one is things like headers, footers, and watermarks. So maybe there's information contained in a header and footer that you don't want the client or the customer to see. So in general, I would tend to keep most of these things checked. I generally leave this on the default. Of course, if you do have ink annotations in your document, then you might want to choose to check for ink as well. So let's click on Inspect. It's going to go away, run through my document, and then it's going to let me know anything that it's found that could be problematic. So if it has a green tick next to it, we are all good. So I think most of these are fine, but we do have some things that I might want to consider removing. So things like comments, revisions, and versions, I'm going to say yes, remove all of those. Document properties and personal information. So you can see here it's telling me that it's found author information in this document and it's asking me if I want to remove that. So I'm going to say yes. Notice as soon as I do remove all, it gets rid of myself as the author. I can then scroll down. Custom XML data. Well, let's remove that as well. Headers, footers, and watermarks. Well, I do have headers and footers. Do I want to remove those? Well, actually, yes, because I remember that I put my author details into the footer. And if I've removed it from the properties, I might as well remove it from the footer. So let's say remove all. And that is it. I can now re-inspect to make sure that I've got everything. And that is looking pretty good. So now if I go back to my document, you'll notice that the headers and footers, that's the most obvious thing, have been removed from this document along with everything else that I specified. So it's always a good idea to run your document through the document inspector. The next thing we can do here is check the accessibility of our document. So this is checking the document for content that people with disabilities might find difficult to read. So it's always worth doing that to make sure that our document is inclusive of everyone. So when I click to check the accessibility, you can see here in the accessibility pane some things that I might need to pay attention to. For example, missing alternative text. Now, if I maximize this and click on Group 2, it's basically picked out my cover page and it's telling me that maybe I might want to add some alt text. Now, what exactly is alt text? Well, alt text is basically some text that you can add to any images or charts or anything that you have in your document that describes what the image or the chart represents. So if you have somebody looking at this document who maybe has difficulty seeing and they're using some kind of reader to read through this document, if you haven't put descriptive text or alt text to describe an image, they're not really going to know that an image is there or understand what it's about. So it's a good idea to add a description. So for this one, if I click the drop down, I'm going to say add a description, and I can then describe what this is. So I might want to say cover page, side image that displays the date, something like that. So once I've added in the alt text, I'd probably want to go through this document and make sure that I add it for all of these. So let's add a description here, pro tip, and then I would probably type out whatever the pro tip text was in there. Hopefully you get the idea. I've also got a warning down here, hard to read text contrast. Let's take a look. So again, for people who maybe have color blindness or difficulties seeing, I might want to think about changing the background color of this shape just to change the contrast a little bit and make it easier for people to read this text. So it's definitely worth going through your document and checking to make sure it's accessible. Now the final option in here is to check compatibility. So this is to check your document for features that are not supported by earlier versions of Word. So we're using Word 2021, which is the latest release from Microsoft. But if I'm sending this to somebody who maybe has a much older version of Word, maybe they're using Word 2013 or Word 2010. What if I've included things in my Word document which aren't available in those older versions? And an example that springs to mind is something like icons. I want to check all of the items in my document for compatibility so I can see how Word is going to handle them when the client or the customer with an older version opens this document. So let's click on Check Compatibility. Now currently, it's checking for all the older versions of Word, so 97 to 2003, 2007 and 2010. Pretty much everything from 2013 onwards is available in the version I'm using and the older versions. So it's showing me here all of the things which might cause a problem if somebody's using a much older version. And it's telling me how it's going to change that for the recipient. So there's some text boxes that I've used which might be causing a problem, so the positioning might change slightly. I can see that I've used some effects that maybe aren't available in older versions, so Word is going to convert these to effects available in their version of Word. And this document contains a scalable vector graphic, so that might be something like an icon. So instead of displaying it as an SVG, it's going to be displayed as a PNG in older versions of Word. So it's always good going through this to make sure that you haven't put in something that just isn't going to show up at all. Click on OK to accept that. So it's always worth running through this Check for Issues button prior to sending this document out to make sure that you're not sending anything that's going to be harmful or damaging to you, that you're sending a document that everybody can access, and you're sending a document that's compatible with older versions of Word. If you're considering sending your document out to other people or sharing it with colleagues, then it might be that you don't want others to start making changes or editing your document. Fortunately, in Word 2021, there are numerous different ways that we can add a level of protection to our documents so that unwanted changes aren't made. So let's explore some of them. Now, if you jump across to the Review ribbon, you'll notice towards the end there is a group called Protect. And there is a couple of different things that we can do in here. For example, we can block specific authors. So if I choose Block Authors, what this is going to do is it keeps others from making changes to the selected text. So I could come into my document and maybe select this paragraph here, and I can say Block Authors. Now you'll notice as soon as I do that, I get a little icon next to that paragraph, which shows me that this section is blocked. And you can see it says when I hover over, to avoid conflicts, other authors will not be able to edit in this area until you unblock it and upload it to the server. So this is effectively blocking this paragraph from editing by anyone other than myself. If I want to unblock, I simply choose Release all of my blocked areas. And then in order to get that to take effect, I need to make sure that I save it to the server. So Control S to save that document, and that icon disappears. So that is one way we can protect specific parts of a document. Another thing we could do is we can restrict editing. So if I click this, it's going to open up the Restrict Editing pane on the right-hand side. And this is where I can choose exactly what I'm going to allow people to edit and what I don't want them to touch. So if I click on the Settings button, I can say that I want to limit formatting to a selection of styles. So I can come through here and I can specify which styles I don't want people to be allowed to make any changes to. So maybe I don't want people to be able to modify heading 1s or heading 2s, or maybe all of the normal text in a document. Now notice below it says check styles are currently allowed. So currently everything in my document can be edited. But I can go through and change this. Maybe if I select none, it's going to deselect them all. And I can just go through and choose which styles people are allowed to edit. So that is another way that you can do this. Alternatively, I can allow only a certain type of editing in this document. For example, I can set this to read only, which means when somebody opens up this document, they're going to get a message across the top that says this document is read only. Now I'm going to look at this in a bit more detail in a moment. Let's take a look at some of the other editing restrictions we have in here. If I have some type of form in my document, it might be that I want other people to be able to fill out the form, but I don't want them to touch any of the other text in the document. So I could choose Filling in Forms to lock down everything aside from the form they need to complete. I can choose if I want them to be able to edit and add comments, or if I want them to be able to track changes. So this really allows you to customize your editing restrictions. For example, maybe I've changed this to no changes read only. I could add some exceptions, so maybe I don't want anyone to be able to edit it other than me and the colleague I work closely with. I can add them from here simply by clicking on More Users and entering in their name. Once I'm happy with my changes, I can say yes, start enforcing protection. And at this stage, I can choose to set a password. So let's just put a password on this and let's re-enter it to confirm and click on OK. So now if I close this down and I'm going to say yes, I want to save. When I try and reopen this document, which is this one just here, notice for me, I don't get any warning message that this is read-only because I'm the author of the document. Now, if I try and make any changes to this document, so if I try and type something, let's click here and try to type, notice I can't type anything because I've restricted the editing. Now, I'm going to jump back into Restrict Editing and I'm going to say Stop Protection at the bottom. It's going to ask me to enter in my password, which I will do. And now I can jump back in and I can carry on making changes. So a couple of ways that you can restrict editing to your documents from that review ribbon. The other way is we can go into File, down into Info, and we have a Protect Document button. So here I can choose to always open in read only. Now what this does is it basically prevents accidental changes from being made to your document. So if I close this down and I'm going to say yes to save and then try and reopen this document, it says the author would like you to open this as read only unless you need to make changes. Open as read only. So if I say yes, it's going to open that document, but I'm not going to be able to make any changes to it, much like last time. Also notice in the title bar, when you've set this to read only, you're going to see that up there. Now, if you want to remove read only, this is a slightly more difficult procedure. So if we go back into Info, you might think you can go to Protect Document and just deselect this option, but you actually can't. What you need to do is go to Save As, let's browse, choose where you want to save it. I'm just going to save it into here, and then we need to click Tools, General Options, and we can deselect Read Only Recommended. Click on OK. We need to resave the document as something else, so let's say Sample Book 2, and click on Save. And that's going to remove the read only from this document. Let's jump back into File and into Info, we can encrypt our document with a password. So this is just really password protecting the document. So I can type in a password just here and then re-enter that password. And then if we close this document down and then try to reopen it, it's going to ask us to enter in that password. So as long as you know the password, you won't have any problems opening this file. Let's go back into File and into Info and take a look at the third option. Now, restrict editing we've already looked at. That's going to open up that pane on the right hand side that we were looking at before when we clicked on this option from the ribbon. The next option we have here is to restrict access. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate this because it needs us to have access to the rights management server, which we don't have access to. So I would recommend that you have a little read up about that if you're interested in knowing exactly how it works. We could also choose to add a digital signature in order to be able to open this document. Again, adding digital signatures requires you to purchase specific software, so we're going to skip over this option as well. Now, the final option that we have here is to mark the document as final. And this isn't a particularly secure form of protecting a document, but it does give readers a bit of a warning. It lets them know that the document that you've sent them is the final version. And the idea of it is to discourage them from making any further changes because it is the final. So I could say mark as final. I'm going to say OK and OK again. And what you'll notice is that as soon as you do that, if we take a look at our document properties, you'll be able to see the status changes to final in here. So now if we close this document down and then attempt to reopen it, we've still got a password on there. So let's enter that in. But it's also going to tell us that this document is marked as final. So in order to start making changes to this document, the user effectively has to opt in and say edit anyway. So they're making a conscious choice to edit this document. Now, the final thing to do here is if you do have a password set on your document and you want to remove that password, all you need to do is go back into Info, Protect Document, Encrypt with Password, and you just want to delete the password out. As long as you're the owner of the document, you're going to be able to do that, and then you're going to have no password set on your document. If you're considering sending your document out to other people or sharing it with colleagues, then it might be that you don't want others to start making changes or editing your document. Fortunately, in Word 2021, there are numerous different ways that we can add a level of protection to our documents so that unwanted changes aren't made. So let's explore some of them. Now, if you jump across to the Review ribbon, you'll notice towards the end there is a group called Protect. And there is a couple of different things that we can do in here. For example, we can block specific authors. So if I choose block authors, what this is going to do is it keeps others from making changes to the selected text. So I could come into my document and maybe select this paragraph here, and I can say block authors. Now you'll notice as soon as I do that, I get a little icon next to that paragraph, which shows me that this section is blocked. And you can see it says when I hover over, to avoid conflicts, other authors will not be able to edit in this area until you unblock it and upload it to the server. So this is effectively blocking this paragraph from editing by anyone other than myself. If I want to unblock, I simply choose release all of my blocked areas. And then in order to get that to take effect, I need to make sure that I save it to the server. So Control S to save that document, and that icon disappears. So that is one way we can protect specific parts of a document. Another thing we could do is we can restrict editing. So if I click this, it's going to open up the restrict editing pane on the right-hand side. And this is where I can choose exactly what I'm going to allow people to edit and what I don't want them to touch. So if I click on the Settings button, I can say that I want to limit formatting to a selection of styles. So I can come through here and I can specify which styles I don't want people to be allowed to make any changes to. So maybe I don't want people to be able to modify heading 1s or heading 2s, or maybe all of the normal text in a document. Now notice below it says check styles are currently allowed. So currently everything in my document can be edited. But I can go through and change this. Maybe if I select none, it's going to deselect them all. And I can just go through and choose which styles people are allowed to edit. So that is another way that you can do this. Alternatively, I can allow only a certain type of editing in this document. For example, I can set this to read only, which means when somebody opens up this document, they're going to get a message across the top that says this document is read only. Now I'm going to look at this in a bit more detail in a moment. Let's take a look at some of the other editing restrictions we have in here. If I have some type of form in my document, it might be that I want other people to be able to fill out the form, but I don't want them to touch any of the other text in the document. So I could choose filling in forms to lock down everything aside from the form they need to complete. I can choose if I want them to be able to edit and add comments, or if I want them to be able to track changes. So this really allows you to customize your editing restrictions. For example, maybe I've changed this to no changes read only. I could add some exceptions, so maybe I don't want anyone to be able to edit it other than me and the colleague I work closely with. I can add them from here simply by clicking on more users and entering in their name. Once I'm happy with my changes, I can say yes, start enforcing protection. And at this stage, I can choose to set a password. So let's just put a password on this and let's re-enter it to confirm and click on OK. So now if I close this down and I'm going to say yes, I want to save. When I try and reopen this document, which is this one just here, notice for me, I don't get any warning message that this is read only because I'm the author of the document. Now, if I try and make any changes to this document, so if I try and type something, let's click here and try to type, notice I can't type anything because I've restricted the editing. Now I'm going to jump back into restrict editing and I'm going to say stop protection at the bottom. It's going to ask me to enter in my password, which I will do. And now I can jump back in and I can carry on making changes. So a couple of ways that you can restrict editing to your documents from that review ribbon. The other way is we can go into File, down into Info, and we have a Protect Document button. So here I can choose to always open in read only. Now what this does is it basically prevents accidental changes from being made to your document. So if I close this down, and I'm going to say yes to save, and then try and reopen this document, it says the author would like you to open this as read only unless you need to make changes. Open as read only. So if I say yes, it's going to open that document, but I'm not going to be able to make any changes to it, much like last time. Also notice in the title bar, when you've set this to read only, you're going to see that up there. Now, if you want to remove read only, this is a slightly more difficult procedure. So if we go back into Info, you might think you can go to Protect Document and just deselect this option, but you actually can't. What you need to do is go to Save As, let's browse, choose where you want to save it. I'm just going to save it into here, and then we need to click Tools, General Options, and we can deselect Read Only Recommended. Click on OK. We need to resave the document as something else, so let's say Sample Book 2, and click on Save. And that's going to remove the read only from this document. Let's jump back into File and into Info. We can encrypt our document with a password. So this is just really password protecting the document. So I can type in a password just here and then re-enter that password. And then if we close this document down and then try to reopen it, it's going to ask us to enter in that password. So as long as you know the password, you won't have any problems opening this file. Let's go back into File and into Info and take a look at the third option. Now, restrict editing we've already looked at. That's going to open up that pane on the right hand side that we were looking at before when we clicked on this option from the ribbon. The next option we have here is to restrict access. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate this because it needs us to have access to the rights management server, which we don't have access to. So I would recommend that you have a little read up about that if you're interested in knowing exactly how it works. We could also choose to add a digital signature in order to be able to open this document. Again, adding digital signatures requires you to purchase specific software, so we're going to skip over this option as well. Now, the final option that we have here is to mark the document as final. And this isn't a particularly secure form of protecting a document, but it does give readers a bit of a warning. It lets them know that the document that you've sent them is the final version. And the idea of it is to discourage them from making any further changes because it is the final. So I could say mark as final. I'm going to say OK and OK again. And what you'll notice is that as soon as you do that, if we take a look at our document properties, you'll be able to see the status changes to final in here. So now if we close this document down and then attempt to reopen it, we've still got a password on there. So let's enter that in. But it's also going to tell us that this document is marked as final. So in order to start making changes to this document, the user effectively has to opt in and say edit anyway. So they're making a conscious choice to edit this document. Now the final thing to do here is if you do have a password set on your document and you want to remove that password, all you need to do is go back into Info, Protect Document, Encrypt with Password, and you just want to delete the password out. As long as you're the owner of the document, you're going to be able to do that, and then you're going to have no password set on your document. We're just going to briefly talk about co-authoring documents. Co-authoring is something that's become extremely popular in the last few years. And what co-authoring is multiple people working on the same document at the same time. For example, if I send a link to this document out to 5 different people, as soon as they open this document, I'm going to be able to see that they are also in this document, and we can all make the changes that we need in real time. I can see the changes that they're making as they make them, and vice versa. So this is really great if you're on a call with your team. You can open a document, all dive in there, and make your changes. So it really is true collaboration. Now, I'm going to try and demonstrate this to you. I am simply one person, so I'm effectively just going to share this with another one of my accounts. So let's jump up to the share button, and I'm going to share this with myself effectively. So let's invite one of my other email addresses. There we go. I'm going to say that I can edit, or this person can edit, and then we're going to click on share. So a little bit of creative thinking here. It says both of my names, but this is effectively another person. This is a different account. So now this person here is going to receive an email with a link to this document. And as soon as they open it, I'm going to be able to see that they are active in this document. So take a look at that. I can see exactly where my colleague is clicked, and I can see any changes that they make. So if she starts typing, for example, the word hello, I can see that in there. Now, if for some reason when a colleague is typing, you can't actually see what we call the presence flag, and that means this little floating thing just here, which shows their name, you need to make sure that you turn this on in your Word options because it's not turned on by default. So let me show you how to do that. If we jump up to File and go down to Options, you're going to find it on the General tab right at the bottom. It's this one here, Show Names on Presence Flags. Once you have that turned on, then you're going to be able to see exactly who is typing and where. And you'll see that if she clicks somewhere else in the document, it's going to move around so I can always see where this person is currently editing. Now, a question I get asked all the time is what happens if there is some kind of conflict? So if you have multiple people in this document and you have their presence flags all over the place, what if 2 people try to change the same piece of text at the same time? Well, basically, the first person there wins, and it will lock out anybody else once they start editing a piece of text. So effectively, Word will prevent 2 people changing text at the same time, and the person who got there first will take priority. As soon as that person moves away from that paragraph, the locking is released and somebody else can go in and make their change. So that's pretty much how co-authoring works. It's a really great utility and really means that you don't have to waste any time sending documents back and forth and saving as new versions. We're going to practice some of the skills that we've learned in this section. So the first thing I'd like you to do is to add the tags solar system, planets, and study into the document properties. I'd then like you to check the document for issues and remove any harmful information. I'd like you to check the accessibility of your document and make changes where necessary. So that might involve things like adding in alt text for any images in the document. Once you've done that, I'd like you to mark the document as final and then share the file with a colleague or friend and practice co-authoring. Now, that last task is optional. If you don't have a colleague or friend handy in order to practice this, then you could possibly try sending it to a different email address that you have, opening it on a different device, and practicing how co-authoring works that way. But I'll leave that final task up to you. If you'd like to see my answer, then please keep watching. So the first thing I asked you to do here was to add some tags into the document properties. So let's jump up to File, into Info, and over in the Properties group where we have tags, we're going to add the tag Solar System, Planets, and Study. I then asked you to check your document for issues. So staying on this page, we're going to go to Check for Issues and Inspect Document. I'm going to say yes to save my file now. I'm going to check for everything. Let's click on Inspect. And if I scroll through, I can see that I mostly have green ticks. There's just a couple of things in here. So I'm going to remove the document properties, so things like author and picture crop information. So let's remove all. If we scroll down, I can see that a footer has been found. Now the footer only contains the page number, so I'm going to leave that in. Let's re-inspect the document and inspect again, and we should find that the only thing remaining is the footer of the document, which I'm absolutely fine with. If you remove the footer, not a problem, as long as you know how to inspect your document. Next, I asked you to check the document's accessibility. So once again, into File and Info, let's click the Check for Issues button and check the accessibility. So I can see in the pane over on the right hand side, I have some things I need to deal with. So I have missing alternative text. So if I click on the first item here, this is my cover page. So if we click the drop down, I'm going to say add a description, and I'm just going to say document cover page containing document title. Let's go to the next one. Let's click the drop down. And I can see that this is the image of the solar system. So let's just say image of solar system. And I'm going to carry on going through these different images. So once again, add a description, NASA photo of Jupiter. Now, I won't go through all of these, hopefully you get the idea, but let's take a look at the next group that we need to deal with. So image or object not in line. Now, if you're not sure what that means, if you look underneath, it says, why fix? If the image or object is not in line, it may be difficult for screen reader users to interact with the object. It also may be difficult to know where the object is relative to the text. And then it tells you the steps you can take to fix this. So you can select the object, right-click, and then change the wrapping options to in line with text. So if you see anything that looks like this, that's how you can fix it so that they're accessible for screen readers. The final thing to fix here would be hard to read text contrast. And you can see we have a few here. For example, the page numbers, we might want to deal with that as well. So go through and complete as much of this as possible, but at the very least, know where to go to check your accessibility and know how to fix the individual items. The next thing I asked you to do was to mark this document as final. So once again, we're going to go up to File, into Info, and this time we're going to jump into Protect Document and choose Mark as Final. I'm going to click on OK and OK again. And the last thing I asked you to do was to share this document with a friend or colleague and practice co-authoring. And once again, this final task was optional. So the quickest way to share from here is to click on the Share button, Share with People, and then we can simply type in the email address of the person we're sharing the document with. So for me, that might be my friend Jen. I'm going to say she can edit, and I'm going to click on Share. If you have shared it with a colleague, then all you need to do is get them to also open the document, and you should be able to see them making any changes in real time. Well, congratulations everybody for making it all the way to the end of this course. By now, you should feel that you have a good, solid foundation when it comes to working with documents in Word. But the aim here is really to give you a good, solid foundation from which you can build further knowledge. So I hope you feel at the conclusion of this course that we've helped you move towards that goal. Remember, if you'd like to go back and do a little recap, you can watch any of the videos, and also remember that you have access to the course and exercise files folders if you want to practice. And that is really the key here. Practice, practice, practice. Try out your new skills on different types of documents, different examples, and you'll be a Word expert in no time. So all that's left for me to say here is thank you so much for choosing us. I hope you enjoyed this course. Once again, my name is Deb. Bye for now.